Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Small Talk. This is the fourth episode and it's all about careers.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. We're going to talk about what it means for the modern day Muslim women when it comes to careers versus being a homemaker. And we're going to kind of dive into it a little bit in depth, more so from my perspective, but my husband will chip in. We will talk a little bit more about the male perspective and what responsibilities the husband has to the wife. So to begin with, the career aspirations I had were really important to me, and I made that clear before we even got married. I wasn't looking to become a homemaker. Not that I won't in the future, but it definitely wasn't something I wanted to pursue straight after marriage. So I actually did tell you that my career is really important to me, and I had just graduated, mind you, so I was literally just at the start, just at the bottom of the barrel of potentially figuring out what my career is going to be. And in the previous episode we did, I think it was the first episode, I said that I wouldn't have said yes to you had you said no to me wanting to pursue my own career. I stand by that. I still stand by that. And that was more because of, at the time, yes, it was important to me. I was looking to get married, but I wasn't looking to be messed around with either. I don't see why me wanting to, and asking about my career choices to my future spouse is such a bad thing. Why wouldn't I? If we can talk about living arrangements, why can't I talk about career choices, future plans, what your aspirations are, what's your hopes and dreams, what do you see yourself doing long term? If that's not something that can be discussed in the time we're getting to know each other, then when is it possible to talk about it? So me saying that I wouldn't have said yes to you had you said no about wanting me to work, I still think at the time, considering the fact that I didn't really know you, so it wasn't like we were in love or anything like that, it was literally...
It was only the first meeting. So.
Yeah, it was literally just, if these requirements aren't met, then I'm gonna know where I stand, basically, and I would have taken a step back and said, I don't think you're the right person for me, because the career thing was important to me, is important to me even now. And I think the reality is actually that nowadays households can't live on just one salary anyway. I think the reality is both husband and wife need to be working to be able to live quote unquote comfortably. And obviously with inflation and everything, yes, it's just a massive headache. But me wanting to work didn't have anything to do with money. Me wanting to work was all about me establishing myself, being my own person. I think that's the main thing, actually. It was being my own person in a married home, living with my in-laws, and just knowing that there was something there that was just about me, or just something I was doing for my own sake. It's the same with me getting my degree. My mum really wasn't, my mum and dad, they weren't really here or there with my career. They were kind of my education. I think they had more higher standards for my brothers because, the burden of looking after the family falls on the boys, right? And I think that's quite normal in our culture.
Oh.
So my parents weren't always they weren't pushing me to be one way or another. They weren't telling me, to study harder or think they were just a bit, let her do what she wants. Once she's married, she's going to have different responsibilities. And a lot of people will be like, well, that's not really right. But I actually appreciate the fact that they didn't put that additional pressure on me to, get the top grades and things like that, because I do think it made me be able to pursue what I wanted to pursue, because I didn't study any sort of A-level courses. So I didn't do English, math, science. I did none of those. I didn't do any of those hardcore subjects. And if my parents were the opposite and they wanted that and they expected that, I don't know if I would have performed well. I think I would have crumbled, because generally speaking, they weren't my favorite subjects. I mean, I loved English, but even then I attempted to try it and it didn't work out. But I think my mum always had it in her head, eventually my daughter's going to get married and she's going to become a homemaker. And I don't think there's anything wrong with her thinking like that, because she's quite traditional, and she, coming into this country, came as a homemaker. She didn't come into this, she wasn't born here, she was living back home in Bangladesh. So for her, that expectation and living in this country and seeing actually what the reality is like for young girls was different to her. It was new to her. She wasn't fully aware that that's, now things have changed. But again, she didn't push me in any way to kind of be a homemaker. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, I think her general thought was, okay, she will eventually become a homemaker.
Okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a homemaker. Our mothers were homemakers, and we've seen firsthand how incredible job they've, how hard the job is, and how they had to manage it. They had to make time for their husbands, they had to make time for their kids, they had to make time for their in-laws, they had to make time for themselves, and they had to make time for Allah, which they did very well. Like, if you nowadays you see a lot of actually people, including myself, who we think we don't necessarily look down upon it, but we think career, we want to pursue our career and whatnot, and yes, that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that either, but we for some reason seem to struggle with making time for everything else sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with that. Pursuing a career is actually, you should, right?
Yeah.
If that's your interest, if that's what you're going to do, you should do it. There's nothing wrong with that. But just like you said before, there's nothing wrong with the homemaker. There are loads of girls nowadays are willing and are happy actually, and they probably want to be a homemaker to begin with their relationship. They're not looking for a career, and that's fine. And there are also people that also obviously want a career because they've studied, like you said. Let's say, for example, you've studied it, right? You've studied in a certain field, and you wanted to pursue a career in that field, which is fine. But I think the problem becomes, or not necessarily problem, but in terms of marriage-wise, when it becomes an issue is when I think this becomes the only thing, and they don't see that at some point they will have to compromise.
Yeah, it's a give and take.
And I think you understand that, where, for example, let's say when we eventually have children, inshallah. I think inshallah, that, and you've said it before as well, that there will be a time where you go, okay, I can't be working full time and look after the kids. It just won't work. And so you know for a fact that you'll have to take some time off, which is fine. But then afterwards, when the kids have grown up and whatnot, you would be happy to go back into a career if you wanted to. At the same time, if you didn't want to, there would be no force on you to kind of go back into a career. Because like you said, for men, generally in our culture and in our religion, the financial burden falls on the man. Now, not
Islamically, yes.
Culturally as well.
No, but as in, just looking at Islam, it's the husband's job, essentially, to look after the wife and kids.
Exactly.
It's your financial, quote unquote, burden to look after us.
Yeah. So this is the thing. So I think in that sense, obviously, women actually have a freedom of actually choosing whether they want to go back or not, right? And not to say this, some women will want to go back, and that's perfectly fine. We know loads of people that are elderly or in their 40s and 50s that are actually doing really well in their professions. Muslim women, and that's perfectly fine. I was actually going to
say that, actually, because I have seen both sides of it with my mum's generation and with my own generation as well. That, I know some people that are like 25 and, being a homemakers, and they're doing an amazing job with it. Equally, I know someone that's in their 50s who had their career, but they also were able to maintain having kids and looking after the family and looking after the in-laws. And, I think my thing is that it's not that I don't... Well, number one, obviously, I am pro homemaking. I think it's such an amazing. I think women who are able to do that, and men, there are some men that do it as well, who are able to do that. You know, I have mad respect for them, because I mean, we literally grew up watching our parents do it, watching our aunties do it, watching, you know, we grew up where we were surrounded by that love of our mum being around constantly to make sure we got the upbringing we deserved, etc. But I think for me, my thing is, it's not that I just wanted to have the choice. That's why when it came to actually talking to you in that first meeting, I didn't want you to be the one to restrict me from having a career. I think as my husband, as my spouse, or my future spouse, I wanted you to be championing me alongside that as well.
Yeah, but I think one of the things
it's fine. No, but it's, and I think this is the other thing. It's fine if you were specifically looking for a homemaker. There's nothing wrong with a man wanting to find a homemaker. There's nothing wrong with a woman wanting to find a husband who's happy to support her career. I think we're all in our rights to choose what we want in a spouse. And I think that's the main thing to just make sure we get out there. It's in your right to have these requests, right? But again, equally, the other person doesn't have to agree with it, doesn't have to accept your hand in marriage, doesn't have to go along with it. So for me, I just wanted to know that as I was 21 when I met you as well, mind you, I was just new, fresh out of university. I hadn't even finished university actually at that point. I still hadn't graduated yet. So yes, for me at that time, in the mindset I was at, career was very important because I was just about to graduate. I was thinking about my career, very much so. More so than I was thinking about getting married, I think. I knew it was coming, but I also was literally doing my final coursework, my final dissertation. So the other thing that was heavy on my mind was the career thing. I'm like, I've just spent 3 years doing this university degree. So surely, what's next for me in that aspect? It's going to be my career, right? But I always knew that, yes, career was important, but in the future, once I had kids, career wasn't going to be my top priority. It was going to be my kids. So being a homemaker was eventually part of the plan anyway. I knew that from the get-go. I always knew it growing up. You know, my mum taught me how to cook, how to clean, you know, how to look after myself, how to look after the house. These were things that my mum taught me that to this day I think are such valuable skills to know. And for me, I think it's not a gender role. So everyone should know how to do these things. These are basic fundamental skills you should know. You should know how to be able to cook for yourself. You should know how to be able to clean up after yourself. You should know how to be able to wash your clothes. Like, I just don't think it's one or the other, right? But I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes in our culture, it does seem very gender heavy, in the sense that, you know, I grew up learning everything, but I don't think my mum could say that she did equally as much with my brothers, because in her head she's thinking, my daughter's going to go to another home and this is going to be what is expected of her. And that's a very cultured thing. It's not a Islamic thing. It's a very cultured thing we have. There's nothing wrong with that and knowing how to look after yourself in that. But I think that's the other reason why, for me, having learned all of that stuff, I knew the homemaker aspect was always going to eventually come out when I needed it to. When we have kids, inshallah, I knew staying at home, maintaining the home was going to be, quote unquote, part of my job. That was going to be my responsibility. And I'm happy to take that on when it's the time and the place. Now, like you said, I don't have to go back to work after maternity leave or after the kids are older.
Just before you continue, I think one thing is important to just outline here is that obviously you said you knew that eventually when we do have kids that would become the priority. It wouldn't be your career, which is fine, and that's one of the reasons. Obviously, when we spoke about careers and stuff like that, that's one of the reasons that really impressed me, because not a lot of people actually have that kind of mentality or the mindset, because sometimes it can be like you said. You knew that once family came into the question and so on, there would be a compromise that you'd have to make, which is fine. But I think it's just knowing both parties have to go into knowing that at some point there will have to be a certain compromise. But it can also be where we've seen, I don't know if you've seen, I've seen definitely, where sometimes because they haven't thought about that there could be a compromise in let's say 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years into a marriage because of children, because of family. Sometimes partners can become very bitter that the other person's able to work or is able to have a career outside of, or have a life outside of the house, whereas let's say as a woman sometimes it can feel like you're stuck at home.
Well, this is
and
the
it can
other
be
thing, isn't it?
So that's the thing. So but it all comes down to, like you said, knowing that there will be a compromise and you being happy with it, because otherwise like I said, it can become where some person can become bitter.
But this is exactly why you talk about these sorts of things before you get married. I think one thing that we did quite well was talk a lot in hypothetical instances. We were talking about hypothetical scenarios and going, what would you do? Now, obviously, our general, I would do this, might be what we were thinking at the time. But it was good to know that that's how you feel. Yes, in certain situations, you might have a bad reaction, you might get angry, but your actual solution to the problem is what I wanted to know more about, because that's, you need to be able to know that on some level that you have the same sort of mentality, or you're on the same sort of page when it comes to certain instances. So yes, the career thing did definitely come up. We mentioned it quite a lot, actually. I even remembered saying to you that, what if, my career kicks off? What's going to happen then? What if, obviously, as a journalist, what if my career wants to take me abroad, or, have me travel somewhere for a month or two? What then? We literally did discuss quite a broad range of different scenarios, because it is important to know where we both stand with it. And I think that's one thing, alhamdulillah, that I'm glad that we did, because now I know, if, for example, my work did take me somewhere, we know what our decision would be, we know what our plans would be. We've already kind of broached the subject, we kind of know where we're both thinking about it, and it might be a great job opportunity, but again, we'd have to look at everything aspect of our lives
at the same time.
Yeah.
Let's say if it might be a decision easily made if you're still just you and your partner, but then if you have a family, then it's a different choice. And then obviously other circumstances, not just your own family or your kids, the extended families as well sometimes. So everything has to be taken into account. You can't just make a decision and just go, because it's an opportunity, or even whether it's for you or whether it's for me, which we've already made, it's my mind made and I'm just going to go. It doesn't work like that. And that's the important thing, is to actually communicate with each other with these kind of things. And sometimes I probably do think sometimes with those hypothetical situations, sometimes it can be a bit too much sometimes, where we don't necessarily actually have to think that far ahead. At the same time,
there's quite a few instances we have gone a bit too far, but actually I don't mind us going too far. I'd rather we go too far with asking the stupid questions than to not know at all.
Yeah, true.
And I think that's what it was for us. Even I remember, actually, we told my second brother about us doing this and talking and discussing these hypothetical situations, and his thing was, well, in the situation itself, you might not react the way you're saying you're reacting. And I said, true, in an argument, in anger, we might say loads of different things, but It's when we're cool down and we've got a calm head and we're actually looking at this properly. Hopefully the things that we've discussed are the things we remember, or are the things that we will want to implement as the solutions. You know, obviously with every circumstance, things can change. But I think I told him that for us, and we actually spoke to him quite intensely about this, I said for us, it was the knowledge of knowing a little bit rather than not knowing at all. And I think that's what it was for us that made it so that, you know, alhamdulillah.
No, but even let's say in a hypothetical situation when we spoke about it, and there was something that, I know it hasn't happened, but let's say there was something that I said that made you angry, or there was something that you said that made me angry. We haven't had that, but let's say we did have it, and then after having that, you know, after going through that situation, in terms of just speaking about it, you realize, you know what, that's not the right way to react. Then hopefully that helps you when it actually, if that was to arise, inshallah, if, you know, it doesn't, those kind of situations, but if it was to, then you kind of at least have spoken and know that maybe being angry about it, or maybe speaking in a certain way, isn't the right way to go about it. So,
in anger people say a lot of things, but they don't always mean it. And I think that's the point.
But I know, but it's so difficult. In the anger stuff, sometimes it needs to be controlled, because it can cause massive rifts as well between people.
Of course, but I mean, in the sense that obviously, alhamdulillah for us, we've not gone through a lot of these hypothetical situations. So we were talking.
Sometimes we do talk about really extreme stuff, which probably we don't need to. But
no, I know we don't need to, but I'm really glad that we do. You know, even things like how we want to raise our kids. You know, those, like, it's just those, like, it seems stupid, but actually, as a husband and wife, surely things like how you intend to bring up your kids, you know, something as small as, do you want them to, at what age do you want them to start going madrasa or mosque and learning more about Islam? Like, I know they don't seem like things to be talking about, especially considering we don't have kids yet, but why not find out these things? Why not be on the same page already before the actual situation or the issue has come up? So for me, alhamdulillah, I think we've actually managed to take certain scenarios that perhaps we've actually seen in other relationships. Actually, I think that's the other thing. We were going based on other people's relationships, asking certain questions as well, to make sure that we weren't out of the loop. Fall into that trap as well. Yeah, we didn't fall into that trap. We weren't out of the loop with one another, and not on the same page with one another. But going back to careers, of course, with my parents, they were a bit more relaxed with me pursuing a career and things like that, you know. But it wasn't that they didn't want me to. It was just, I think, there was no urgency there. I think even for my dad, actually, his thing was, you're my daughter, I will look after you. If you need money, I'm here to help you. I'm here to protect you, look after you. Do you get it? So when I did start working part-time, I think for him, he was just like, you know, it's good that you're doing this, but you do know that, you know, I'm here to support you. You don't have to be working, which is also a really lovely thing, by the way, like having that support from my dad. And, you know, not feeling that, again, that pressure. I don't know, did you feel like you needed to be pressured into working quite soon?
No, but I think it's good that, you know, you probably didn't feel that pressure, because sometimes that can be too much, you know, for people. So obviously it's worked for you, and it's, you know, it's you know, yeah, it's worked well for you. But I think men is probably slightly different, in the sense that we know we are the
breadwinners, essentially,
yeah. So we know, obviously, you know, so we know that we have to make money at the end of the day. Whatever profession you go into, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a teacher, whether you're, you know, whatever you go into, at the end of the day, most of the financial burden will be on us men. Whether, you know, your parents, if you're living with your parents, or whether even after marriage your wife is working or not, that financial burden will always be on you, like I said to you, whether your wife is working or not, whether she, again, and I said at the beginning, it's her choice. Obviously, like you said, in today's climate, it's very difficult to survive on one person's, earning just because of how much everything's gone up in some price-wise. But at the same time, I know that that's my duty and that's my responsibility, and that will always be my duty and my responsibility. And this is something that obviously my parents and my dad have spoken to me many a times about, and it's not something I've gone, I haven't questioned it. I've just grown up knowing that this is my responsibility, and I haven't gone, no, why should it be? I'm fine with it. I'm happy with it because that's, like I said, I've grown up knowing that that's going to be, that's my duty.
See, so like me knowing homemaking would eventually become my duty as well. So I do think, yeah, in that sense, there are like that differences in terms of like you growing up knowing that. One thing I will say is that you have been massively supportive in my career, and I think that has made a massive impact on me personally in being able to freely or equally give it up once we have kids. I think had you not been so supportive with what I've been doing and, actually getting to a point, alhamdulillah, where I am established and I am in a good position, I think if you weren't championing that, yes, maybe in the future I would have resented giving it up because I hadn't gotten to a place where I wanted to be. But alhamdulillah, I don't think I'd feel like that because you'd always been by my side supporting my career. And so even if I gave it up, I'd never think, or I'd never be like, oh, he made me give up my career, or I don't think I would feel that way because you've been supportive, and especially during the pandemic where I wasn't finding work for a really long time, you told me to persevere and wait, and then alhamdulillah, timing was everything. Allah knows best.
And they got an award for it.
And I did an apprenticeship scheme, I did a Kickstarter scheme, and yeah, I got nominated for an award for it, which is crazy because no one, I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just like, finally I'm getting in the right direction of a career, and like I've got my foot in the door. And straight after doing that 6 months, I went on to do the apprenticeship scheme, which I'm currently doing right now, and we're approaching our 1 year of doing this apprenticeship scheme. So I work at the Times. I'm an apprentice journalist for them. I never thought I could actually be working at the Times, number one. Like, I was 14 when I met someone, a fellow Muslim brother-in-law that was working there. And he was the first person that I had met that was a journalist. And I remember meeting him and thinking, oh my gosh, he's doing the job I would love to do. And at 14, I kind of knew that was like the place I'd eventually love to be. So, alhamdulillah, in the 3 years we've been married, like...
So imagine that then. Imagine you obviously, you told me about this before, but imagine you said you met this brother-in-law and he was a journalist at Times, and you were like, you're kind of my inspiration and I want to get to where you are. Imagine that, having that dream, and then I went, you know what, I don't want you to work. Imagine them after marriage. Imagine the amount of resentment that you'd have.
Exactly my point, which is why I don't think when I do become a homemaker, inshallah, I don't think I will have that resentment. Even though, let's say for argument's sake, I didn't end up at the Times. The Times was a bonus. As in, honestly, genuinely speaking, it still baffles me that I'm working there today because it seems so far out of reach.
It's also,
especially for a Muslim hijabi woman, it did feel almost like it was impossible. And it's not just with just the Times, it's with a lot of media industry, like newspapers and magazines.
No, but it's good, I think, because
Alhamdulillah, of course.
it means obviously people that, just like you were inspired by a prophet, or maybe you might meet somebody and you might go, I work, for the Times, and that might inspire somebody else to get into journalism and they possibly pursue a career at Times. But it's all about, obviously, especially with that industry, it's all about kind of breaking, not breaking, opening doors for others and showing that, you can get into the same career or you can have the same type of career. Because it's, for us Muslims, obviously, I think that industry it's
never been in our favor. Basically, the media industry has never been on our side, not for a long time. And
I don't think it's ever been on our side.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and so that's why me wanting to work at the Times seemed so far out of reach, because it seemed almost impossible. And wearing a headscarf, that was another battle on its own, right? And you're right. I think one of the reasons why I have pursued journalism so much and wanted this particular career is the fact that I want to break those stereotypes, break the stigma around Muslim in general. And then I also wanted to show that, Muslim women as well can have careers. It's not I don't know, I think they feel like we're always constantly oppressed in our religion, in our lives, with our husbands.
That's probably untrue.
Exactly. And
not probably, that's definitely untrue.
Yeah, exactly. As in, like, it's ridiculous that people think that, me having a husband, I'm, like, restricted from doing certain things. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Our relationship is a two-way street, just as your normal relationship is for you as well. And this is why I pursued journalism for so long, is because every reporting that I was reading and looking at, it was just bothering me so much with how wrong they had Islam, how wrong they had Muslims, how they would only advertise a lot of negative stuff around us. Where's the good that we do? Where is all of that being advertised? And yeah, alhamdulillah, yes, I am now in a position where I am able to share some of the good, or make sure our stories are coming to the front. It was great because you were supporting me in pursuing a career in journalism. You knew that one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue a career in journalism was because I wanted to try and make these changes. At my company now, which is News UK, we have a Muslim network, which they didn't until I started it at the company. And it's just the little things, we're just trying to make sure we feel represented in these industries. And it's just important to be able to do those things. Like, I can't expect change to happen in the media industry if I'm not in the media industry trying to make those changes happen. Do you get it? Like, it just wouldn't work.
Makes sense.
It wouldn't. I can't be like, why are you reporting like that? Or I can't question a journalist writing on a subject about Muslims or Islam if I'm not there to be like, hi, why did you do this? Or like, why would you say it like that? So like, yeah, and I've spoken to other journalists. Actually, I'm coming in as a Muslim representative. To me, it seemed weird. To someone reading it, it might seem weird as well. And it might, quote unquote, bring a stereotype to the Muslim community.
No, but I think it's important, obviously. Like you said, even they might be able to explain it properly, or they might not. Who knows? But it's important to ask those questions. Otherwise, like you said,
if we're not gonna quote unquote call it out, then who is?
I mean, this is the reason why. Like you said, I think you told me before, where if people don't like something on TV, they complain to Ofcom or something.
Yes,
right?
Yes. Got it right.
So, like, if we like. I think if as Muslims probably in the community, if we don't like something that's been shown by being portrayed by the media or on TV,
Ofcom is where you need to go and report something.
We should. If it's incorrect and if they're portraying Muslims or maybe Asians in a certain way, we should. If we don't agree with it, we should complain about it.
For example, let me actually give you an example of this. Piers Morgan, the whole situation with the Piers Morgan walking out on ITV, and what he said about Meghan Markle, that got over like 54,000 complaints to Ofcom. That's a lot of complaints, right, for one instance. And that was all to do with mental health. And I think him kind of explaining that he didn't believe her, right? But I was thinking, when I remember we talked about this and we were saying how it's crazy because there's a lot of instances where we are not represented well, or someone said something and actually
No
we
one said
have
anything.
and we have the right to complain. Like, it's there for anyone to use, and hopefully us actually talking about it,
I think
you
it's
can
just people are
complain.
not aware of it. That's why.
That's the thing. So you can complain on Ofcom about TV and like reporting from that, and then you can also complain to IPSO, which is the Journalism Code of Conduct. And IPSO is the one where anything that's published can be complained about. And, we are in our rights to complain. We can be upset about certain ways of reporting. But I think our community, our just doesn't know about it. They just don't know how to report stuff like this.
Well, I didn't know about it until you told me. So
Yeah, exactly. To be fair, even growing up, I didn't know there was ways for us to complain about something like this. And that's the other thing, I think we can't expect change if we're not rallying for those changes, if we're not calling people out or calling the media out on it. Now, obviously, this is not a whole rant about the media and how it's not been great to us, but yeah, I think we should go back to what we were talking about before that. But yeah, I think there's so many other aspects we could talk about in this. This is a very broad subject. Number one, careers. We've spoken a little bit about homemakers versus careers.
yeah, so no, this is just looking into the perspective, a modern woman's perspective of what she wants to do, and what her interests are, and how she feels about her career going into a marriage or going into proposing a marriage.
Yeah.
So that's what this episode was about.
And let me just say that being a homemaker is a wonderful thing, and I think we have massive respect for our parents, our aunties, those that have done it, because it's not an easy task to do. I actually think being a homemaker is a lot harder than actually doing your 9 to 5. Like, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more different aspects.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, there's a lot of other aspects that we just wouldn't consider with a normal 9 to 5 job. And
and you're not getting paid for it.
And yeah, you're not getting paid for it, And I know the modern day girl wants a career. I think it's very normal for that. And I guess the pressure of marriage is then not so heavy on them, in the sense that a lot of parents do actually let them pursue a career and then think about marriage. Or it could be the opposite, where you've just graduated and your parents want you to get married and establish a career after you're married. Like, there's very different situations and scenarios that happened.
It works both ways. I mean, like you said, I'm sure loads of people that are successful both ways. They got married young, they had family, and then they started a career, and they're doing amazingly well. Or you also know people that got married, had a career, and then had a family, and then they continued it. So it's really, honestly, just up to the two people that are married.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to decide basically how they want to do it and how they want that to play out. But it's, like I said, it's ultimately both compromise from both people, and knowing that there's going to be at times where the career thing might have to take a back seat for the lady, and then same thing for the man as well. Sometimes it can be that, but it's knowing that there could be a point where I have to take a step back. That's important.
But yeah, and I think that's why I recommend, even when we did our first episode on arranged marriages, I recommend you do talk about these things, because they are important. It seems silly now, but it is important to know these things and be on the same page about these things. For us, an arranged marriage isn't a love marriage. It's not the same concept. It doesn't work where I've fallen deeply in love with him, and then I'm asking him about career and he says no, and I'm just leaving heartbroken. No, we literally asked those questions on the first meeting. I knew hardly anything about him. He knew hardly anything about me. And it's fair for you to choose to say, no, I don't want to be with someone who doesn't want me to pursue a career. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't. Yes, there are other aspects about him that you might want to consider as well, which is why I think in the instance that I met you, I might have been so hung up on the career thing, but I think I would have really given it a lot of thought, because everything else I liked about you. Other aspects in our conversations, I liked we were on the same page, you know. If you had said no, I would have genuinely considered it and really given it a thought, because you've given me no other reason to say no to you except that. But alhamdulillah, you didn't say no. So I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you've been a supporter. And, you know, vice versa, I'm being as supportive as I can to his career. But I think for this episode, we're going to leave it here, because honestly, I could go on and on about this. And we'll probably do another episode on careers, generally speaking, as well. More in the sense of, you know, pursuing our careers and like how that went down and things like that. And like, how do you choose what career you want to go into? Like, those sorts of questions will be more like a general chit chat. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
We hope you found our conversation useful and informative, and we'll see you on the next episode, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.